specifically say women who are in marriages or these long-term relationships, because I can speak to that because that's where I've been,
Right.
is that the challenge a lot of times for women, especially if you're socialized a particular way. Now, I'm a Southern girl, so I was socialized a particular way. I was socialized.
Now, what do you mean by that? Socialized a particular way?
So I was a Southern girl raised in a Baptist church. And so, a lot of my identity was shaped around patriarchy. It was shaped around male leadership. Wives, submit yourselves to your husband as unto the Lord. And for a long time, I identified with that in my marriage very early on. Even so much when I prayed, I would say, God, bring promotion in my house through my husband. I would exclude myself in the prayer altogether because of the way I was theologically framed and socialized, both in my house and in the church. So I saw my humility as more of this naivete, kind of, you just kind of stay in the shadow, you make sure your husband is out front, he's leading, and he's leading with excellence. Now, mind you, I don't have a problem with that, as long as the husband is leading well and leading with excellence. But now, to be told now, your girl got some things she gonna do too.
Okay.
And so that was what I had to sit with. That was what I had to come to terms with, because it began to frustrate me. It began to make me feel left out of not just my marriage, but the plan of God for my life. And not realizing that everything I prayed for, God was manifesting. God was not operating contrary to what I was asking. Everything I was getting, I was asking from God.
So let me ask you this. You said that God was manifesting and you were seeing it. Was it because of being in a family, or kind of help bring some context to what you're saying? I know what you're saying, but bring some context to what you're saying.
So I was raised by my grandmother. My grandmother was a very strong woman. She my grandmother, she did the books, she did the bills, whatever, my grandfather was a very laid back kind of guy, but it was different when we were in the church. The leadership. I was also raised in a church where women led from out front, but when we found ourselves in other churches, the context of the theology would always look different, because there was always men leading from out front. And those congregations were a lot larger. They were they were growing, versus the church where I was raised and grew up, very small churches, maybe 15, 20 members at the most on a good Sunday.
Right.
And so this whole idea of women in leadership, women leading from out front, women who the presentation looked a certain way. Women were supposed, now again, even though I had women leadership, again, my grandmother, she was a woman who led in the home, person from a certain perspective.
Okay.
But still, when it came to how you present yourself, you looked a certain way.
Gotcha.
You spoke a certain way. You graced yourself how you navigated through your job, through the world, just the world in general. You presented yourself a certain way. You didn't look too worldly. You didn't.
Okay. That's fair to say. That's fair.
And so that translated into, again, my marriage. Because the only framework I had for how to be a wife, married at 19, the only framework I had was my theological framework, and what I saw kind of presented in my home. Now, again, my grandmother, she was, of course, a very conservative woman, but she always looked really, really good.
Right.
And so, but growing up in a church where that presented theology in a way that a woman had to be modest, her dresses had to be a certain way.
And look like Jezebel.
You don't listen. You don't dress your face up. You don't put no red lipstick on. You don't cut your hair. And again, a lot of that translated into my marriage because I felt as though that same presentation, even as far as my intimacy, had to be more conservative. It had to be more dressed down. It had to, that my voice, the tone of my voice had to be often lowered, or, I can't be this loud out front
Right.
person, how I seek after my purpose, my calling in life. It had to be one that was kind of this side by side, as opposed to this person who, if God was calling me to lead from out front, then that was, to me, because of how I was raised in the church, was somewhat
Right.
not in line biblically.
So here we are. We're dealing in this time, and you were blessed, fortunate, just like myself, to be raised in those Southern Baptist traditions. But here we are, here and now.
Mm-hmm.
Let's take it to where we are and what we're doing with everything that is going on. We're dealing with, what do you think is the missing thing because you talked about the relationship we have to have with ourselves, that's self-love. You talked about this respect that we were, that was indoctrinated in us from our family and our family values, right? So now we're in a time where people got trust issues. They got this issue. They have this new thing going on. I can't think of the name of it, but it's like you got these open relationships, right? With all the good Gucci stuff that we've been talking about. Speak to some of the things that people are really dealing with when it comes to relationships, whether they're married, long-term, intimate partners, relationships on other angles. Give me some context to it. Make it live about what people are really dealing with, because now people have hid from each other being busy. As you said, it was good when your husband was traveling. So you could have a Kimwana when he wasn't there, and then you could have a Kimwana when he was there. What do you think some of the things that people are being confronted with, that people are becoming overwhelmed and being in relationship? Let's talk about that.
Well, again, I think that is going to really look different from relationship to relationship, from home to home. That's going to really look different. But what I find more in my experience and in conversation with different individuals who have reached out to me, I think what I find to be one of the challenges for in this time of isolation is the refrain, well, I didn't know that about her, or I didn't know that about him. It's now being present. We are forced to be present with one another. We are forced to sit and observe and look at one another and see stuff and hear stuff we weren't seeing and hearing before, because life, business, all these other things required our attention. Church, ministry, entrepreneurship, all of these things required our attention.
Okay.
But when you have 24 hours, and everybody doesn't have that privilege either. So let's be clear, because there are still people who are working outside of the home. But we still have more hours that we are spending, as you know, if we find ourselves, if there are those, for those persons rather, who are finding themselves in the house with their intimate partner, or with their spouse, or with family, on a more full-time basis, like 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And let's just be real, that's a lot. That is a lot. And
So do you think that the secrets that was there, that why relationships are being challenged, is being exposed?
I won't say secret, but because at the end of the day, it's been there all the time. We just haven't paid attention to one another. We haven't been present, fully present.
That's good.
And, you know, if it's the kids, if it's work, if it's the dog, if it's, you know, trying to get to the next level in your entrepreneurship, trying to, you know, a lot of us, child, we trying to find these new institutions to start classes with, since GREs ain't required no more in a lot of these schools. Just trying to figure out, you know, is God calling me to do a new program, you know, instead.
So I don't want to interject, but someone just put a question in the thing, and they said, you know, about finding and discovering about what your partner was hiding from you, and now you got to deal with it. Can you speak to that? The realness of finding out that you were actually sleeping with the enemy.
Finding out that you are sleeping with the enemy. Well, you know, that individual has to decide for themselves, is this that moment that is the deal breaker? Because right now they're in isolation. And if finding this out in this moment for them is the deal breaker, then it is now determining what is the strategy, what are those exit plans. But let's even go back before even that, because again, for women, when we come into relationships, and this is something I've said to other women who have reached out to me, when we come into relationships, especially if we are coming out of relationships, long relationships that have been resulted in either divorce or poor breakups or hurtful breakups, and now you find yourself trying to enter into another relationship or another situationship. For women, we have to decide, before I enter into this new thing, what for me is the deal breaker? What for me is a no? You know, this person can come and do this, they can come and say this, but if this happens, for me, this is the deal breaker. And when that thing shows up, when you have to now confront that thing that you said was the deal breaker,
right?
Is it really the deal breaker? And if it's not, that's okay. But you have to determine, now what do I do to reframe my own mind around what I initially determined was the deal breaker.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, only you, only me, only another woman can decide for her what is the deal breaker. Anybody can come along, give her advice, be suggestive, and even call her crazy for staying. But at the end of the day, every individual has to determine for themselves what is the deal breaker. And if she chooses to remain, even after she's designated that thing that was the deal breaker has now showed up, she's trying to confront it, and she still determines that she's still going to try to stay and work this thing out, that's still okay. But now she has to reframe her mind and figure out, how am I going to navigate this part of what I said was a no? Because it's going to look different.
So what is it that you think that's going to help them navigate the deal breaker if they stay? You know what I'm saying? I mean,
Well, she has,
mm-hmm.
well, that's going to have to be determined with her. That's going to have to be something that's going to be determined internally for her, because if that thing keeps showing up and she has decided that it is the deal breaker, it's going to continue to trigger something in her. And it's going to continue to diminish and eat away at who she is. The more she says, okay, okay, okay.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But she has to come to the point where she has to decide, this is a deal breaker. Now, let me just say this. It's going to be difficult.
Okay, that's fair to say.
It's difficult, especially for people for a woman who has years invested in a relationship. It's hard. People can easily tell you, child, just leave him. Go ahead and go. That's easy for people
Right.
to say, who are on the outside checking you. But if you have time, if you have money, if you now have legacy attached to that, that's not an easy walk away.
Mm-hmm.
Even when you have determined that this is the no for me, it's not easy. So let's going back to, what does she do? She has to find therapy.
Okay.
Because she has to now deal with something internal and see and ask herself some difficult questions about, and one of the questions could be, well, if this is the deal breaker, why am I now deciding that this is not?
Why be double?
Other than the obvious,
Right.
other than the years invested, other than the legacy now attached, other than the money or the finances that may
But
be.
ain't love enough? Love should be enough. That's all we need is love, right?
So, Tina Turner said, what's love got to do with it? That's what Tina Turner said. But the truth is that we are emotional beings.
Okay.
Women are so different from men. Women are emotional creatures.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not suggesting that that we're different. But what I'm saying is women do have a way of investing more emotionally and spiritually, and not taking it from any of the men who are doing that as well. But in my own experience, women invest more emotionally and spiritually of themselves in relationships when they feel like they have made a particular connection with a person. And so there is that challenge that comes with just saying, you know what, I'm done with it. Because
Right.
how many times have we really said we're done when we're not really done?
So you speak of this, and most of the time you can't give people that kind of counsel unless, because I'm getting ready to go deeper, right?
You something.
It says to be or not to be.
That's what you said, friend.
You and I both know we both been in many places in our lives, some where they have been deal breakers. Have you ever been in a place that you might want to be somewhat a little bit to help people, because there's men and there's women that's looking and questions are coming through, and I'm trying to hold back on some of the questions, but speak to what may have been a deal breaker in your 26 years of marriage.
Woo, honey.
Let's go there.
Okay. So let me start by saying, and offering this disclaimer.
Look, take a little sip of water.
Let me offer this disclaimer. My husband knows, my husband is my guy. He knows that we've had conversations, and he's very much in alignment with how I use my platform to help other women or couples who find themselves in some of the places that we found our own selves. So I just wanted to offer that disclaimer.
Okay.
So let me just say, I married my husband at 19. Now, I married my husband, number one, because I was pregnant. And number two, because I was raised by grandparents. And anybody who know grandparents in the South, grandparents in the South are strict. They tight. Love them to life. Yes, I do love my grandparents, but my granny more so than my grandfather was very, very strict. And so when my husband decided that he wanted to marry me at 19, came home from the military and proposed, I was like, yes, take me, get me up out of here. Let's go. But the truth of the matter is, like, when I said yes to marrying my husband, I don't want to get married. I don't want to be
What
married.
you say? I ain't hear you. What you say?
I didn't want to be married. I did not want to be married.
Let's
But
tell
I wanted to
the
get out
shame
of,
the devil. Right.
but I wanted to get out of my grandparents' house. And so, listen, that was a moment where I was like, the Bible says that the Lord will give you a way of escape. Let me take this escape.
Right.
Baby, I was, listen, 19 and eisegeting the death out of a scripture. But I took that as my way of escape, getting out. And for me, the very thing that I said would be a deal breaker, number one would be, don't lie to me. I don't do lies. If you can't be honest with me, just don't say anything. But
Okay.
don't tell me a lie. And so the very thing that for me that I said was a deal breaker was the very thing that I ended up coming back and doing to him. And that was lying. And that was lying.
You didn't lie. Not Miss Southern Belle.
Yeah.
Okay. And what did that do to where you are? Because the reason why I'm pushing the bar a little bit, because I've had people in this present place where we are globally, a global pandemic, they're dealing with the truth versus lie. They're discovering things about their husband or their wife or their girlfriend or their boyfriend. And it's not sitting pretty, right?
Mm-hmm.
So with that being said, how did that affect, you're still married?
Well, what it did.
The deal breaker, why are you still there? Or why is he still there?
That's a good question, because I know I'm a piece of work. But what it did for me was the reason why I realized even why I was so frustrated with myself in my marriage was because my husband was causing me to see things about myself that were so triggering. Things I had not accepted about myself and who I was. A lot of times, and anybody know my husband, now let me say again, he's not perfect, far from it, but my husband is he's very out front. My husband, like, he just always been that way.
Okay.
And he don't do a whole lot of talking. I'm the talker. I'm the one who puts it all on the table, while, my husband, he'll just kind of go as far as he feel like he needs to go, and then that's it. But so one thing I realized about what I said was the deal breaker was because I had not worked on that thing in myself.
So it goes back to that self-reflection.
Mm-hmm. It was the thing I had not dealt with within myself. I had told myself all these things about myself, told myself all of these things that I was, that I wasn't, and quite honestly, they weren't honest. Simply because I was not ready to confront the truth about who I was fully at that time. And so when I was able to come face to face with that truth, then I was able to say, you know what, this is why this was the deal breaker for me. And even when both my husband and I confronted it, my husband even said to me, I knew this moment would come. I just didn't know how we would face it. What we would do to deal with this thing once it came face to face, once we came face to face with it. Because we dealt with infidelity, not from him, but from me. And so again, that was because I had not dealt with my own internal stuff from
So wait a
years.
minute. So in other words, he had to deal with your infidelity as opposed to his infidelity. I'm just trying to see what you said.
That would be.
Okay. All right. So do you feel that when you went through this defining moment, because it was a defining moment, because you're still here,
Yeah.
do you feel like your marriage made you a better person?
I don't feel like my marriage made me a better person. I feel like I've grown inside of my marriage.
Gotcha.
And I've become better. I've matured.
That's good.
I've matured. The marriage couldn't make me nor break me if I was not willing to do the work internally. And now somebody said, what was the stuff? Do you feel like marriage made you a better person? Yeah. So no, the marriage has not made me better. The marriage, inside of the marriage, I've grown, I've matured, I've taken time to do the work that I needed to do in myself and with myself, to grow through a lot of childhood trauma, a lot of stuff that I did not confront, and the truth of the matter, did not have the resources at the time to go and sit and talk through this stuff.
Right, because you said in the beginning you was trying to get out of grandma's house.
Baby.
So getting out of grandma's house, you also took the baggage that you had when you was at grandma's house.
All of it.
Okay. Okay.
All of it.
And so is it safe to say that some of the things that people are actually dealing with to be or not to be, the part that's difficult is not so much about the other person, it's really about who? Themselves.
Well, and we bring a lot of baggage, and I don't want to project on anyone else, but certainly I brought a lot of baggage into my marriage, and as well as my husband brought a lot of baggage into our marriage. But for me, it was, being raised by my grandparents, and not really having this fortified or this one-on-one relationship with mother nor father. And so for me, the struggle was, where do I fit in this world? Where do I belong? Who do I really belong to?
Right.
And so entering into my marriage, I had to really, it was a struggle for me to really find out who I was.
Mm-hmm. So at one point you said you grew in the marriage. When did you embrace the marriage? Did it take for you after the infidelity arise? Was it before the infidelity arise? Because obviously it was a turn in the road. And
let me be clear.
Okay.
I loved my husband from day one.
Okay.
I always loved him. But the marriage part of the getting married, like it was preeminent because of I wanted an exit strategy. And it had nothing to do with whether or not I loved him. I loved him. Love him even more to this day. And that's the part I think where as crazy as it may seem, even beyond the infidelity, like our relationship, our love, or rather, our love, it went to another place.
Okay.
It grew even beyond, it matured even beyond where it was. We did counseling. I did my own counseling separately because, you can't stay in relationship with people forever and not bring somebody in to help you do the work to remain in relationship, especially not an intimate partnership or a marriage with another person. that goes back to some of your question with this whole isolation. People are married to people, especially younger marriages. Child, ooh, blessed Jesus. I don't know how well I would do if I was a young couple. And when I say young, I'm not talking about age. I'm talking about like, even if my husband and I were 45 and 47 as we are now, we just married, and then we now thrown into isolation. And now I got to see all of this stuff about him that I did not get a chance to see about him prior. Like, I probably would struggle. But because I've had all these years
Right.
with him and have seen a lot of this stuff about who he is, and truth of the matter, some of the stuff that I'm saying about him now, I'm like, sir, who was that? Where did that come from?
So, so you said something about you got married young. What is your recommendation for people who want to get young? Would you advise them to get young? I mean, get young, but get married while they're young? Or do you advise them to grow into who they are and then get married? What's your thoughts on that? Because you said you was trying to get out of grandma's house, I'm going to live through, ain't nobody gonna tell me how to do this. I'm grown, I'm getting it. I'm getting it in.
Leaving at 19 with a baby on my hip, a little
Right.
one on my hip, and moved. And let's be clear, let me add a little bit more context to that. Child moved away from Mississippi to Texas. Child didn't even know what in the world I was about to do, but I did something. And apparently it did okay 26 years later, because the truth of the matter is my husband and I don't fall our teeth and tongue. We don't, we argue. Child, we'll have a knockdown, drag out argument up in
Okay,
here.
talk about it. Mm-hmm.
We will battle. But when we get ready to go to hit that pillow at night, we're gonna wrap up, because this thing is gonna have to be resolved.
So now wait a minute. What is the difference in saying what you said,
Mm-hmm.
the world's view of relationship, and say if you have God in the mix?
Mm-hmm.
What's the difference?
Okay. So
You had a flashback.
And I don't want to sound super spiritual, because again, I'm clear that marriages don't do well unless you have the work of therapy inside of it.
Mm-hmm.
Because at some point there has to be someone who is able to come in and mediate some of the things that you're not able to hear each other say. Child, because there are times when my husband and I will say some things, and he ain't listening, I ain't listening, child. And my husband know me right that, listen, when I hit 40, listen, the whole table turn, and I require being heard. So I'm that kind of person now where I will go on and on and on until I believe that I've been heard. But that benefits nothing and no one, because at the end of the day, the only thing both of us are doing is losing energy. We're fighting against each other. Nobody is being heard. And where is the solution coming in?
Mm-hmm.
There is no solution.
Right.
So inside, whether you're married, if you're in this long partnership with someone, even if you are living inside of homes with family members, loved ones, listen, at some point, there has to be someone who can come in and mediate these spots where you have this tension and nobody is listening to anybody anymore. No one is being heard. It does not make for healthy relationships.
Right.
It works against you not only emotionally, but it works against you internally. It works against you physically and spiritually. You can't hear or see God if you are constantly arguing or debating your side with the people that you say you love. Then that begins to translate over into your relationship with your girlfriends. You're trying to figure out why I can't keep no girlfriend. Why everybody always acting like they're mad with me? Well, come on now. we got to sit with ourselves too. I have to sit with myself and ask myself, what is the thing that's always triggering? Why is it always that I'm feeling a certain kind of way when certain points or certain words or certain thoughts are come up or come across?
Right.
Because
So,
there is something that is undone, unfinished, unworked on in me that needs to be addressed and dealt with.
and I see you always go back to, and I thank you for that holistic view. But would you agree at some point someone has to do more than others at time for the relationship? You
Yeah,
got this look on your face like,
I'm not gonna stroke myself on my shoulder or my chest or whatever, but I realize that.
because you made a lot of sacrifices in your 26 years at that marriage, being a military wife.
And I want to be fair and say, yes, a lot of time the spouses make, tremendous sacrifices, but certainly don't want to take from, the work that the spouses, the soldiers themselves do as well, because I truly do believe for those men and women who serve, who love their families, that they lose as much time and feel some kind of way about being separated from their families as well. But certainly there is a tremendous emotional weight and emotional burden that rests upon, that has rested upon me when I've had to now work through the things in my home like I was a single parent.
Gotcha.
You
Right.
know, raising.
Did that cause you to want more from your marriage? And
Oh,
what
absolutely.
yeah, so what kind of points would you offer to someone? Because someone just asked the question, if you're in that particular situation, what point would you offer to someone where you are required more of the other, whether it's you or the other individual, so that you can allow this marriage or this relationship to sustain itself? Because a lot of people honestly are, I did a statistical study, and people are searching out more divorce attorneys now more than ever before. And it's because they're really discovering, who did I marry? And and what is it about me that I don't like this individual, anymore? And that's why I laughed about the different people talking about, my husband's whistling, he's snoring, he's doing this. Well, he was snoring before. How come you never noticed it before? And I'm coming from a background where I was divorced, and I'm going to be married soon, okay, eventually. And so I know that I'm taking my time to really talk about this, because we have preached, we taught, we Bibleized it, we spiritualized it, but we need to know some practical stuff. Yes, God, especially for those who know God, He is the center of that relationship. And know that it's God, family, and then the church. But what happens, I want to say, is that we miss those what's the word I want to use, that clinical side of some good points, and how to be in those places where you deal with some challenging times. And this right here now,
Yeah.
either gonna make or break a relationship.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I share with some of the couples that I have talked with, or just women in general that I've talked to.
Yeah, you got some good advice. You helped me. Come on, somebody. Lord Jesus, come on, tell me, folks.
One of the things especially if, and so I want to go back to the question about, do you suggest for young people to get married at such a young age? So I want to say this, and this will include that as well, that question as well. I want to say this is that whether you are pre-marriage, whether you are engagement, whether you are dating, especially dating, that's the
Right.
good point, or already in the marriage and you got years in, here's what I have learned out of my own experience, whether it's good advice or not. One of the things I always share is, make your expectations known. If you don't have any expectations, then whatever you get in the relationship, you can't be mad. So what I'm
Say that
saying,
one more time. I heard you, but I need to hear that again because that was good.
make your expectations known and be very realistic about these expectations now.
Okay.
And then push your partner, your spouse, that person you're in a relationship, push them to make their expectations known as well, so that when either of you are not coming up or measuring to some degree realistically up to that, then you come back and you kind of readdress or sit with that thing again, and you determine, okay, even if that was realistic or if it wasn't, because let's just be clear that relationships are always working. They're always working. And so sometimes you have to reframe, rework, recalibrate something
Okay. That's
that
fair.
you initially came in the relationship with and decided, this is what my expectations are. And listen, as you hit milestones, because my expectation from my husband when we got married at 19 was definitely not the same at 40. And if your expectations are still the same,
That's good. That's
then
good.
you nor your partner have really grown or matured much inside of the relationship. So, I say, and this is what I challenge my husband to do. I always say, listen, when we hit milestones, I say, babe, we got to sit down. We got to figure out what the expectations are again, because we've hit another milestone, something else. And my husband.
How do you know you hit a milestone? How do you know that? What constitute a milestone?
So for me, my milestones were when we had children. Child, it was coming so fast, but we had to hurry up and write the different expectations. And we had grandchildren because we realized we had a legacy at that point, and we had to prepare for if we wanted to leave something for this legacy or not. And then when he hit 40, because let me just say this, I love my man, but child, his 40 looked a whole lot different from mine. His 40 was like kind of more of a premenopausal thing, as opposed to my 40 was like, let's turn up. And so there was.
That's an adjustment.
It's an adjustment. So you come, you say, okay, babe, these are my expectations. And then when we come back, again, with my husband being 3 years from 50, he's 47. So he'll be 48 this year. I'll be 46 this year. So with him running towards 50 faster than me, we'll do another expectation for him at 50. Or for me, I did mine last year because I hit 45. And so again, whenever there are these milestones, my husband hit his promotion. He got promoted 2 years ago. The expectations had to be different. So this is
because you were transitioning into the peak of your career, where you've been a mother, raising your sons, making sure they got to college and in their life, and now you are in the prime of your life. Yes.
Absolutely. So again, that's one of the things that I push when I am asked to counsel couples. It is, make your expectations known. It's okay that you have to go back and revise what those expectations were. But when you revise them, be honest and be fair with your partner and let them know how those expectations have either changed or evolved or how they look differently. There's nothing wrong with that. I think that it's all about being fair with your partner, with your spouse, with your loved ones, about where you are with them,
right,
in relationship with them and to them. Because again, even if it's a parent, like sometimes you just got to be able to tell a parent, look, I know you expected this out of me when I was 19 and graduating from high school, but that's not where I am anymore. You can't hold me to that expectation, because some of us are still trapped by the expectation of our parents. At least I was for a long time.
Okay. That's fair. Now That's some stuff right there. Now I'm gonna give you a clap on that one. Okay, that's some good stuff.
I was, because I knew my parents expected a particular thing from me, and that's okay. That's okay. But I can, I can meet that. I can come to that place to some degree. But if their expectations of who I am and where I'm going and what I'm going to do does not fully align with where I am trying to go and what it is that I'm trying to do, then it's fair to come and say, listen, I appreciate that you have these expectations of me, but that is not where I am.
Mm-hmm. So we're coming close to the end. And I know some people have other questions, but the one question where I would like to ask is, what would you say to anyone that may be watching? Because you talked about expectations.
Mm-hmm.
I believe I heard you say communication is the key.
Mm-hmm.
Also, therapy and being able to work through milestones in your relationship. But even though you got married at 19, can you agree that when it is someone that God has ordained for you, do you feel that it was just the connection? Because you just don't stay with someone for 26 years for nothing. What was it about your husband, even at 19, that you knew? Obviously you knew, even though you grew in the relationship, you knew that he was the one, or was he the one that knew? Because it may not have been you, but it may have been him. Am I clear on how I'm asking it? Because I think a lot of people struggle with, okay, is this the right person?
Yeah.
Should I really put all my eggs, or should I put my all into this because this is the one I'm supposed to be with? I'm not really sure what God is saying. What is it? What's that little secret ingredient?
First of all, let me apologize for my dog. She is really tripping. She is like, y'all needs to get off of this phone or whatever y'all doing, because it's time's up. Well, let me just be fair and say this, because I don't want to pigeonhole anyone into a particular formula or suggest that I have the answer, because that answer is one that I don't have for everyone. Let me just say what happened for me and what we knew. For me, in my relationship with my husband, especially entering into ministry, what made me realize that God sent this man for me, to be in relationship with me, was how he covers me. Now, I have anybody laughing and tell them, don't ask my husband 1,000 verses from the Bible, because he ain't gonna be able to quote you 1,000. And he'll tell you that.
Yes,
Look, he'll tell you it's in one of them 66 books. But he covers me, and he looks to see what I'm not able to see. And so he's prayerful in that way. He stands back and watches how others come for me, how they speak.
Right, because you're in the limelight. You're the speaker, the preacher, the theologian.
Right, and he listens for how people speak about me and speak to me, and he covers me. And so, even after all these, and it didn't start out that way. My husband and I really connected because we both were in the church. My husband was a drummer, I was a singer, a worship leader. I did more of the teaching and the workshops. My husband was my husband played instruments. He was a drummer and a bass player. But because we were already connected in that way, it was as if spirit aligned us. And we, listen, I didn't even know who my husband was. My best friend in high school introduced me to him. Girl, and I saw him, I was like, oh man, he's short. So sometimes, you be like, yeah, because now talking about expectations, one of my expectations was, child, he had to be almost at least near 6 feet. Child, when my girlfriend from high school introduced me to him, I was like, girl, now this does not meet the criteria. But jokingly saying that somehow God, God aligned us and caused me to see what I didn't even know I needed.
That's good. And I think a lot of women that's watching this, they need to hear that, because you and I have talked about this on many occasions. A man knows. They know who their life partner is. They may have some growing to do, that individual may have some growing, but they know. So I thank you for sharing that. We're out of time because, I want to really keep it down, but I don't know if any other people have any other questions. If you do, you can ask them at this time. We could try to answer it. There's so much to cover on this area. And Kiwana, I thank you for taking your time and really just articulating and not getting so deep and spiritual, because we all know that God is, and we were in the right relationship, God is in it. Now, if it's hard and difficult, you need to question, is it the right relationship? And so I thank you for just being candid in this conversation and really showing us who you are as an example for others who are married. 26 years, I admire it. Some people don't stay married longer than 6 months these days, because we're this whole generation, they think differently. But I am finding that I think what they call them, the alpha generation, they're going back to marriage. They're going back to not just living with someone. They're going back to the old ideal. Somebody made a comment. They was like, thank you for your truth. And right. And I thank you for your truth. So with that being said, there's many other places we could go in dealing with relationships, especially with single women. That'll be another time. Because when you talk about dating is collecting data. That's a whole nother something.
Can I just say one thing before?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. I do, since I need to say this as well.
Come on, Reverend.
Sometimes.
Let the prophet, you are the relationship prophet. I'm going to tell something before we get off of here. Go ahead.
She's something.
All right, Tara, we know you said it.
Let me just say this too, when, as Pastor Aisha talked about, if you're wrestling in a relationship, you may want to question whether or not God is there. Let me just say something in addition to that, because I don't want anyone to feel like, because you are experiencing some tense moments, you are experiencing some questionable things inside of your marriage. Let me tell you, there ain't a day up in here that there ain't some questions going through my head, just to be honest. But let me just say that is not suggestive of the fact that God is telling you to move beyond your marriage or move beyond your relationship. What I have found, it is those moments where you have to sit and reassess or reevaluate.
Yes.
At what point in your relationship are you in? Because both of you may be having a growing spurt, another phase of where you are in your life. And if you are not able to communicate what you are feeling and what you are experiencing with that partner or your spouse, then sometimes making these rush decisions to hurry up and make your exit or get out is more fatal than it is healthy. So sit with whatever it is you're wrestling with internally. All wrestling is not bad wrestling.
Good.
All this tension inside of you doesn't always have to do with your partner. And trust me, I will be the first to say, I am not removing anybody in a relationship of their responsibility. I own fully when I got my trash. But I also make my husband own fully when his stuff is being projected on me as well. So I say, please, sit with the moments where you have this wrestling and this tension between the two of you, because sometimes it's just a matter of having a conversation about
Yeah,
where you feel like you are in the relationship.
that's
And
good.
again, it may be a matter of you coming back to each other and saying, listen, are we meeting each other's expectations? Are we at a point where we're going two different ways and we're now pulling on each other as opposed to pulling each other together on the same journey? Because that's a different thing. And one thing you can always know is and this is scripture, uh, if your internals are going off, red flags are going off, yield yourself to that. That's something else. That's a whole other thing.
Right,
Because intuition is everything.
right.
Trust it. You trust it. It is spirit doing something internally.
Mm,
Don't ignore it. And it could just be this thing going off for you. But whatever it is, don't ignore it.
right, right. I definitely agree with that. Well, woman of God, this was so good. If there are any other questions, I don't see them, but I will say this has been rich. I know that we are in a time where God is calling to heal our families, because when we heal our families, we'll heal relationships, we'll heal the community. And with healing the community, the world will change. Everybody's out for themselves these days, and we come from a platform that we have a different aspect of it. We're slowing down and entertaining and listening to people with care what's going on in their situations, because you don't need to throw out every baby with the bathwater. Some things you just need to dialogue through, communicate through. We are big, you and I both, because we're pastoral counselors. We are big on doing counseling and really seeing the different things, why it got to this place, the dysfunction in the family, all of those areas. And then at the end of the day, there's prayer. Because we don't know what else to do. A family and anybody that pray together will stay together. And you and I have been friends for a long time. We have prayed together. We prayed through. We prayed through, just transitioning into this place where we are. So I just want to tell you thank you. Tara tells you thank you. Thank you, Tara. But at
Thank
this
you.
That's you.
anything you want to say, Tara? Because Tara, how long you been married?
September will be 16 years.
Yes.
Yes. Glory to God.
Yes.
Anything you want to add to this comment before we close out?
I know I want to thank you for your truth. I enjoyed it. I felt your passion, because women always want marriage, but marriage is work, and it's for two mature people. And sometimes you got to put in more. Sometimes you have to just fall back. But I do know that you need God in your marriage for it to be healthy. And when Pastor Aisha said the question, like, if you're wrestling too much, sometimes you have to wrestle in it, or you have the hard times, because it is what grows you. It strengthens your faith in God. And a lot of, single women say, I want to be married. I want to be married. A man will never complete you.
Mhm.
It's going to be places that your husband will never, ever fill. And you find that again in God, and just basing your marriage around that. I'm looking forward to the next platform, to be or not to be, with some women that stay in relationships so long. Like you did make a point. Men decide to get married, and they know when they want to get married. And sometimes women say, oh, he's my husband, I want to get married, I want to get married. But you go into it, and that's why the divorce rates are so high, because you're not a really ride or die. to stay in that marriage to make it work. So this was awesome. And I enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.